Okay, continuing right along, we've done 4 videos now, all of them on teams that did not make the playoffs last year. So, enough waiting. We're going to give Mackenzie his flowers. He is the reigning champ. We will do his video next. So, don't worry, I still got you as a playoff team too. Maybe not as good as the drafts of previous people who I've done. I don't think your draft is as good as Justin or Ryan or Stefan's, but that's okay. I think you had a good draft. So, and I think, last year you got the monkey off your back, you won a title, so you don't really need my approval anymore. You kind of got it. So, all right, let's get into it. 14 overall, Jonathan Taylor, $70. Okay, I had Jonathan Taylor last year. He missed the first 4 games. He got his extension. Happy for him. Incredible, incredible player. Not as good as, funny enough, 3 years ago when he was the #1 fantasy player in football and he was an All-Pro in 2021. But in his 4 years as a running back, he's been very good. Last year he was very good for me. He obviously didn't play as many games, so the stats aren't going to be as big. He only had 741 yards rushing, only 151 yards receiving. But I think he only played, he only played 10 games for me, and he got hurt right before the fantasy playoffs. I even missed him, I think, from one of the weeks of the fantasy playoffs, and he came back in the finals for me, and he had another good week. So, what do I like, what do I don't like? I like Jonathan Taylor. I mean, I wish I had his #1 fantasy season of 2021. I probably would have won a title if I did, but sadly I did not. He was worth every penny, though, for me last year. It was funny. Him and Aaron Jones just both being hurt at the same time, and then both coming back for fantasy playoffs, and me just kind of like, let's go wreck some people, and it worked out. So, I think $70 is a lot. $70 is a lot for a player who's coming off, like, basically playing half a season. That's my one worry. I mean, yeah, Aaron Jones went for 27. I know Jonathan Taylor's right in his prime. I know he got paid. I know he's really good, but woof, that's a lot. So we're going to think he's healthy, though, because he's been historically healthy for most of his career and because he's still on the good end of his spectrum as a running back. 1,200 rushing yards, probably 10 touchdowns, probably 300 yards receiving. That is basically like top 7-ish fantasy running back. Possibility of being like top 5-ish. $70 is a lot for him, but you know what? If you're going to jump in and go for somebody, I mean, Saquon went for 69. It's kind of like that. The one rub is Jonathan Taylor could be the #1 fantasy running back in football, but the same way Saquon's kind of held back by Jalen Hurts. Jonathan Taylor's kind of held back by the possibility of Anthony Richardson. Now, granted, we've never seen Anthony Richardson be healthy for a full season. He literally played only 1 year as a starting quarterback in college, so I still don't really know a whole lot to make of him. I mean, Trey Lance only played basically 1 year of quarterback in college. Mac Jones only played 1 year of quarterback in college. Kyler Murray only played 1 year of quarterback in college. Mark Sanchez only played 1 year of quarterback in college. Cam Newton played 1 year of quarterback in college. So there's a lot of basically the upside is Cam Newton, Kyler Murray. The downside's Mark Sanchez, EJ Manuel. He's bad. So I don't think Anthony Richardson's that bad. He looked pretty good. I know, Robbie took him basically on the upside, but I gotta see this. Dude's a huge unknown. I hope he protects himself in the red zone and stops trying to be Jalen Hurts, because Anthony Richardson, despite being possibly bigger, is not as muscular and, frankly, not as strong as Jalen Hurts and gets beaten up. He gets injured a lot. So, what's to say? The only thing possibly holding back Jonathan Taylor from being a top 5-ish fantasy running back is the idea of Anthony Richardson possibly taking goal line touches from him. So, we shall see. I don't really know. It's just as likely Anthony Richardson could get hurt and just be gone for the season again because he thinks he's Cam Newton, but he's built like Jeff George. So I'm not really sure. I'm gonna say Anthony Richardson plays at least half the season, though. I think that's a decent bet, like 9 games at least. And that will lower Taylor's upside. I still think he's an incredible player. I still think, I mean, gosh, he had 8. He only played 10 games. He had 8 touchdowns last year for me, so I can't imagine he gets any less than 13 if he plays the whole season. So, yeah, 70's a lot. You basically paid for what he's worth, though, so I respect it, especially because he was on my team, and especially because we've seen a #1 fantasy season from him. So it's not like it doesn't exist. There's just some... It isn't what I would do. It's not my cup of tea, but I understand the logic behind it. So I do like it. 30, a lot of 35s here. So 35th overall selection. We spent $35 on Mike Evans. This is kind of where I say, like, this is kind of like Max. Like, Mac always does this kind of like safe picks kind of thing. Like, Mike Evans is like his safe picks kind of thing. Like, last year he took Amon-Ra St. Brown at $35, and now we're taking Mike Evans at $35. Now, granted, Mike Evans had a very, very good season under Baker Mayfield. He was the 6th best fantasy receiver. He's also going into, year 11 now? So he's getting older. He's like 30, 32 now. He's a future Hall of Famer. He's been a 1,000-yard receiver every year of his career. Yeah, he was the 7th best fantasy receiver, so it was like his best season since like playing with Jameis Winston way back in the day in like 2016 or so. So, and he's never had a fantasy campaign where he's been worse than, like, I want to say like the 24th best fantasy receiver. It might be 23. But anyway, he's always had a top 25 fantasy receiving season, so that's like his floor. He's never going to be the #1 fantasy receiver. Like, it just won't happen. But he is knocking on the door of being a top 5 fantasy receiver. So you're paying more for the floor than the ceiling. I think Davante Adams is a more talented player, but I think Mike Evans is in a better situation. They're both around the same age. So yeah, I think he'll get like his 75 to 80 receptions. I think he'll get like 1,100 yards, so not as good as last year, but better than the year before that. I don't know if he's going to get like almost a touchdown a game. Like last year he got 13 touchdowns. I think we're going to have to cut back on some of that regression. I think we're getting like 7 or 8. But he is a solid, good wide receiver too. He's not a star. I don't think he's going to have as good a season as he did last year. But you paid him like... You kind of paid him. You paid him as much as Davante Adams, and you're getting the floor. That's the difference. So Davante, there are ways you can see the floor bottoming out. There's no real bottoming out. Even if like Mayfield got hurt and everything went to hell, Evans would still get his. So he's a good player. You paid for him basically what he's worth, exactly on the dot. I like him. I just don't see him being like as good as he was last year. I see him more as like maybe like the 12th or 13th best, maybe 15th best receiver, which is still for $35 exactly what he's worth. But expecting him to be like top 6 or 7 is a lot. But you paid for him at cost, so I respect it. Okay, so now we took a little bit of a swing. So 42 overall, $19, Stephon Diggs. This is like the lowest someone spent on Diggs in a while. We would have to go back to like before the pandemic in Minnesota, because last year Diggs started off like white hot in Buffalo, and then down the stretch he was ice cold, kind of like AJ Brown, only even colder. Now he's in Houston, going into year 10, playing for a contract. There are questions. Has he lost a step? Is the diva personality of him outweighing the production of his superstar level? Will he be overshadowed by Nico Collins or Tank Dell or both? It's a lot. It's a lot to juggle. Personally, I'm not sure what to make it. He was a picture-perfect fit with Josh Allen, but then they fired the offensive coordinator through half the season, and then they started going run-heavy, and now they don't really have a number one receiver. There's a lot of questions in Buffalo. I can't really go too much into what happened in the second half because I don't really know. I mean, partially it might be he was unhappy, but I don't really see anything that I've watched on film that he's lost a step or anything. There's a lot of questions. I don't really know how to answer those questions. I think, personally, the way I just said, Mike Evans is a wide receiver 2. I think Stephon Diggs is a wide receiver 2. I think Houston's a better situation currently than Buffalo because they have a better O-line and they have a much, much better offensive coordinator who's actually going to make it a point to get the ball in the best player's hands. Problem is, I don't know if Stephon Diggs is the best receiver on the team. Now, if he is, then you just got a wide receiver 1 at cheap costs. If he's not, well, he could become a malcontent and pull a Terrell Owens. So I don't think that'll happen, but if I was betting on someone to do that in the NFL, Stephon Diggs would probably be number 1. So I think he'll get his 1,000 yards. I think he'll get like 6 or 7 touchdowns. I think we're gonna go in the middle. We're gonna say he's gonna have like a wide receiver 2 type of year, probably right around Mike Evans, 12 to 15. You paid 35 at cost for Evans. You got a discount on Diggs, but that's because there's the fear associated with like him going AWOL or him just like leaving or what have you. But hey, you know what? He was still the 10th best fantasy receiver last year. Evans was the 6th best fantasy receiver. Getting them combined for basically $54 is really good. In years past, like we'd have to go back a while, but in years past, if you got Diggs for that would have been worth it. So I don't know if you're going to find that level of like him being a number 1 fantasy receiver. Those days might be behind him, especially because there's a lot of mouths to feed in Houston. But he's a really good player. He's been a really good player for a long time. He's in a situation where he has to perform or he's not getting a contract. I think buying low on him is a good idea. I would have done the same. So I don't mind it. I respect it. I think after taking Taylor and Evans, I like this more. 55 overall, $6, Dak Prescott. Well, I mean, so good thing is Dak Prescott was the number 3 fantasy quarterback last year, which is kind of crazy to say. Everything gets overshadowed by him in the playoffs. He was the number 2 player in MVP voting, right behind Lamar Jackson. So, I mean, granted, Lamar Jackson got way more votes. I think he was almost unanimous. I think he was 1 vote off. But Prescott had an incredible year. He had a career season. I mean, he threw for 36 touchdowns. He only had 9 interceptions. Paying $6 for him is good. I think that's worth it, considering the season he had. Because also, what everyone's probably considering, and what I'm probably considering, is I don't think he's going to have as good a season as he did last year. Even if I thought Tony Pollard was compromised, he's gone. We brought in Ezekiel Elliott. That's a downgrade. The offensive line is not as good. We lost Tyron Smith at left tackle. We lost Biotish at center. We brought in a new tackle, Tyler Steele. We took in the first round. I'm not really sure if that's going to go over hot. So there are questions in Dallas. I love to make fun of the Cowboys, but there are definitely questions. He also had the most passes completed last year. I think he had 410. It is hard. It's hard for me to believe that Dak Prescott will be as good as he did last year. But the fact that you got him at this little cost means it's already kind of baked into where he is. So, I mean, out of loyalty, I guess running it back with him isn't the worst idea. It's not a great idea, but I guess it's a good idea because there's the possibility he does what he does last year, however remote I think it is. We've seen it now. And quarterback's the easiest position to fill in our league. I don't know why people take backup quarterbacks. The whole point of free agency is to have a full, vibrant free agency, and you can just pick up quarterbacks and use them and then turn them loose. Anyway, I digress. Prescott at $6 is a good deal. That's a good deal. I mean, he has QB1 upside, and he is also playing for a contract, so it's not the worst idea. 71 pick, $27, James Conner. All right, so this is more, again, kind of playing it safe, taking a safe player. I like Conner. I mean, he always misses games, but he's found a home in Arizona. He's a quality player. He's very, very reliable. He usually gets like 18 touches a game, which is frankly a lot at running back right now. And he's been actually semi-efficient. So despite having terrible quarterbacks the last couple of years, he's been a top 20 fantasy running back. So he averages about like 80 yards a game. Last year was actually his first time he got 1,000 yards. He's 29 now, so same age as Ezekiel Elliott, same age as Dalvin Cook, and frankly, he's better than them now, which is weird to say considering their careers, but because all that low usage early in his career in Pittsburgh, he has more tread on his tires. So I think they drafted Trey Benson in the second round out of FSU. You have Benson later in the draft. We'll get into that when I get to him. But Conner's a good player. He's a quality player. He's a good RB2. Solid. That's what I would describe a lot of these guys as. I think Jonathan Taylor's a very good player. I think Dak Prescott is solid. I think Mike Evans is solid. I think you got Stephon Diggs at a discount. And I think James Conner is solid. So I don't think he's going to break 1,000 yards again. I think he'll have a worse season. But, 850 yards, 6 touchdowns, and then some sprinkling like 30 receptions. It's a good RB2. It's good RB2 territory for a guy. Getting him for $27. I mean, we've talked about it. He's a top 20 fantasy running back. So yeah, $27 for fantasy running back, top 20. Yes. Don't care where he lands in that top 20. He could be number 20. $27 for him, right on schedule. That's a good deal. Good deal. So we like that. 92 overall, $14 Terry McLaurin. So everyone makes fun of me because I really like Allen Robinson II. Well, you know who reminds me a lot of Allen Robinson II in his prime? Scary Terry in Washington, where he just is continually trapped in a never-ending bad situation. This year, we're going into his 5th year, and I mean, he's been paid, and he's had 1,000 yards 4 straight years with terrible quarterback play. And now we get Jaden Daniels, who we mentioned Bo Nix is like the most starts of a college quarterback ever, most experienced player to come to the NFL out of college because he started for 5 years. Well, Jaden Daniels basically started for 5 years. One of those years is like halvesies, but he also had a ton of games where he started. And frankly, if before last season you told me Jaden Daniels was going to come out in the draft, I had him as like a 4th or 5th round pick. So he had an incredibly efficient year, but I'm also kind of like, it was a 1 year, he's 23 years old type of quarterback, and so I'm hesitant about it. But it was an incredible year, I'll give him that. And they took him at number 2 overall, and the offensive line is better. So I'm hoping, especially because Jaden Daniels is my fantasy quarterback, that Scary Terry finally gets some quality quarterback play. Because if this man got quality quarterback play, people would understand that he's like Washington's version of Mike Evans. He's incredibly talented. He's really, really good at finding basically space anywhere underneath. He's really good at go routes deep. They just never really give him the ball a lot. Like, I think he only had 4 touchdowns last year, which is crazy to me because he's so talented. Like, DK Metcalf's in the same draft as him. A.J. Brown's in the same draft class as him. Like, those guys get a lot of publicity, and he gets none because he doesn't get any shine because they keep having bad quarterback play. So, I think, like, last year he was like the 28th fantasy receiver, which sucks because I think he's a really good player. But I think it'll be better. I think we'll do like maybe 1,100 yards. So ballpark kind of around like Mike Evans. He's got to score more than like 4 touchdowns, man. I can't believe that's so low. That's so low. if he could just get a touchdown total of like 8, he would be a top 20 fantasy receiver. So I think he's great. I think getting him at this price is great. I think there's some upside there because you're hoping Daniels turns out to be good. I would have loved him at this price. I think he's a quality wide receiver 2. He is essentially your wide receiver 3. $14 for him is a steal. It's a steal of a deal. I really like that pick. I think there's some upside with him. 98 overall, $7 Nick Chubb. All right, so here's the good, here's the bad. Lauren spent like a ton of money on him last year, and then he blew out his knee in week 2. And before that, he was like a high-end running back. He was like the number 5 fantasy running back 2 years ago, and he was the number 10 fantasy running back 3 years ago. So last year, he was like a top 3 projected fantasy running back, and the Browns' offensive line was considered to be really great. And now we're coming a year later, and he's super injured, and the offensive line's coming off a ton of injuries, and Watson's coming off injuries. It's a lot of questions in Cleveland. I don't really know what to make of all of these injuries in Cleveland. So what does that all mean? Well, I guess getting him for what you paid, which is $7, was good. I mean, we've seen him be elite. The problem is running backs, like an injury like this, unless you're essentially like Adrian Peterson level, kind of like superhuman freak athlete, is usually pretty devastating. Like he tore his ACL, MCL, PCL, and meniscus. It's a lot of cartilage, man. I'm not even sure if he'll make it back. Like, I think, if I remember correctly, Jamal Charles had the same type of knee injury, and he did not play the next season. I think I even drafted him, and he didn't play the next season. Yeah, so, I mean, paying $7 for him or just kind of seeing isn't bad. I think if they bring him back, they'll bring him back very slowly. I think if he comes back, it won't be till, like, at least November. Gosh, that injury happened, like, week 2, so talking like early September last year. 13, 14-month recovery. I don't mind it. You can't expect him to be like this year, just like, oh, I'm going to get $70 Nick Chubb. Like, what you ought to be expecting is what Javonte Williams looked like last year. And that wasn't with as devastating a knee injury. Javonte Williams the whole year just looked not right. Jaleel McLaughlin looked better than him. He just didn't have that explosion. And I don't know if that's the injury. I don't know if he's fully recovered now a year after it. But basically this year, having had that injury to Nick Chubb, I don't think he's going to be the same. I'm afraid he's going to go from the guy to becoming a guy. But on the off chance he does become something, I don't mind it at $7. I think considering how safe we've kind of played it with some of our picks, doing that with Chubb is like a good upside play. So it's not bad to kind of just like see. I'll split the baby and say he might be like a top 15-ish fantasy running back when he comes back and if he's fully healthy. I don't know when that will be, but we'll say 125 carries, maybe 625 yards and like 5 touchdowns. But you're basically just going to have to play it safe. Even if he comes back, I wouldn't start him immediately just to see them probably bring him back slowly. Because if they bring him back and it's like, oh, we're going to give him 100% of his touches now, like that would be really foolish because until you're in the game, until you see him like kind of slowly ramp up on that knee, you're not really going to know if he's fully recovered. And it's going to take a while. He's not practicing yet. I mean, he's barely putting weight on the leg. So he might not play at all. But that kind of makes sense with your next pick because at 120 overall, you spent $5 on Jerome Ford. Last year you took Ford. You sniped him from Lauren's second consecutive auto draft. So last year she auto-drafted and did take Chubb's handcuff, and Jerome Ford was the handcuff, and he was okay. I mean, I think he's more of a guy than the guy. He's kind of just like there. I think paying what you paid for him is good. He's basically kind of like a lot like Ezekiel Elliott, if I'm being honest, only younger, I guess. So he averaged like, what was it last year? He was like the 17th best fantasy running back. That's pretty good. It's basically like James Conner. So he's a good player. With Chubb's uncertainty, you're basically banking on the volume. I'm genuinely surprised that you picked up Pierre Strong and then you got rid of Deontay Foreman, because I was thinking that they would bring back Foreman and he would kind of like split carries with him, because if I remember correctly, yeah, they brought in Kareem Hunt last year after Nick Chubb got hurt and he was splitting carries with Ford. I don't think Ford can handle the load. All of that's to say, I think Ford's a good player. I think what you're paying for him is to get a top 20 running back is kind of funny, considering we paid 27 for James Conner, and now for Ford you paid 5, and lo and behold, last year their seasons were incredibly similar. So if he's a top 20 fantasy running back, absolutely worth it, no doubt about it. Really quality player. Just again surprised you let Deontay Foreman go, but hey, what do I know? Yeah, I think that's a good deal. Quality player. 132, $6. So we paid more. Trey Benson, basically our handcuff to James Conner. So FSU has been churning out some running backs. So we had Dalvin Cook. We tried Cam Akers. Now we're trying Trey Benson. I like Benson. I don't think he's going to take over the job from Conner this year. I think that's probably coming next year. But with Conner always getting hurt, Benson's a good player. If I don't sound as high on him as I usually sound on rookie running backs, it's because he's it's hard for me to really have a read on him, because last year when I watched him at FSU, he's a former 5-star running back, but their offense was basically built around quarterback Jordan Travis. And basically, you don't glean a lot from watching him. Basically, the holes are almost the blocking's kind of predetermined. He's got some speed. I don't really know if he has very much vision. I don't really know too much about if he fits this offense. It's not like what I usually understand, where there's a young running back like Bijan Robinson, or I was high on Zach Moss. I was high on Sean Tucker last year. I was high on Aaron Jones. I like Benson. I think they overdrafted him. I don't know if I would have taken him this high. Jonathan Brooks, before he got hurt, was a way better player. But again, you don't really know coming off those injuries. He's a good player. Again, I think they overdrafted him, but also Arizona, for whatever reason, openly chooses to have terrible running back depth. I don't know why they got rid of Michael Carter. I thought Michael Carter was fine for them last year when Conner was hurt. So I think Benson's a good player. If Conner gets hurt, he's definitely the starter, so I get that. Getting him for $6 is a good deal. I don't know if there's a whole ton of upside with him, but I don't know. This one's tough. It's tough for me because I don't really know what to make of Benson, unlike what I usually feel about rookie running backs. But I think he's a good player. So another good deal for you. We'll skip through the defense. We took Trey Sermon for $1, so he's now the new handcuff for Jonathan Taylor. I've always liked Sermon. I remember when he got drafted in the 3rd round in San Francisco. So he's always had talent, especially with Zach Moss gone. Presumably he would be the guy. He would be probably more of a timeshare than anything else. But, he's more just like a handcuff. There's talent, so we'll see. That's not bad. I don't have a whole lot to say about Sermon. Romeo Doubs for $1 is a steal, especially because, what was it? If I remember correctly, he's always had a connection with Jordan Love. He might have led the Packers in touchdowns last year. Yeah, he led the Packers in touchdowns last year with 8. I think he's the wide receiver 3, but he's almost like the handcuff to the other 2 guys ahead of him. One's Christian Watson, who's always continuously, for whatever reason, hurt. The other one, I think, is Jaden Reed. So I don't mind Dobbs. I think he's a good player. I think Jordan Love is legit. I don't like Matt. I don't like Matt LaFleur. I've never liked Matt LaFleur. He did the same thing with A.J. Dillon and like Aaron Jones, and now it's just like, oh, we have all these really great young receivers, and I'm kind of like, cool. Who's the number one? Who's the guy? I don't want all these good average to above average receivers. I want a star. I want a star receiver. I want Stephon Diggs teaching Josh Allen. I want Mike Evans teaching Baker Mayfield. I want Odell Beckham with Eli Manning. I want Justin Jefferson with Kirk Cousins. I want Deebo Samuel with Ayuk. You see what I'm getting at? So I don't mind Dobbs. I wouldn't start him at any point unless one of those two guys ahead of him gets hurt. But, maybe 600 yards, less touchdowns, 5 touchdowns. And then we took the receiver right behind him in Dontavion Wicks. I mean, Wicks had a good season too. But I really wish one of the, if I'm being honest, I wish two of these guys would get traded to other teams that would use them. Pittsburgh would be nice. I would love one of them on Pittsburgh because they're young, talented receivers. I think Wicks wasn't a top 40 receiver last year. You're basically almost seeing if there's injuries, which I guess isn't bad because Watson's always off injured, and Robbie took him again because you can't get enough of him and his hamstrings. So it's not a bad bet. It's just kind of hard to figure out at any given time when you're going to start one of these guys unless everybody else is hurt. Because Love's basically going to pass it around and no one's the guy. Everyone's a guy. So probably same thing, 600 yards, maybe 3 or 4 touchdowns, and then you're just waiting on off weeks to play him. But I don't know if I would have taken both of them, like Dobbs and Wicks. I might have just for variety picked other than the Packers offense something. I mean, there's got to be some other offense somewhere with some players, but I mean, you got Wicks for $2, so that's super cheap. And then Brock Bowers for $1. I mean, he was selected really high by the Raiders, 13th overall. Especially even though they already had Michael Mayer, who they took in the second round the year before at tight end, and they have Devontae Adams, and they paid Jacoby Myers, and Gardner Minshew's the quarterback. So, I mean, the offense at Georgia was built around Brock Bowers. So, this offense ain't built around him. It's just not. I think he's got, tight end 1 upside. I mean, considering how many tight ends Ryan just took, taking Bowers doesn't seem half bad. And honestly, there is some upside in case something does happen with the Raiders. If they were to trade Devontae Adams, I would genuinely consider building the offense around Brock Bowers. There is some, George Kittle level talent there. But he's just not in a great situation. So maybe 600 yards, maybe 4 touchdowns, kind of like what we're talking about with Wicks and Dobbs. But I think he has more upside than either of those guys because, I mean, he has a lot of talent. He was drafted really highly. They should be very motivated to use him. And essentially, Zamir White doesn't catch passes. So really, I would say he's more talented than Jacoby Myers. So we're really just talking, other than Devontae Adams, Brock Bowers should touch the ball more if they're passing the ball. That's really the question. They seem to want to run the ball. So where do I have Mackenzie out of all of that? I think it's a good draft. I don't think it's a great draft. I like your draft better last year than I like this year's. I think this year's we're not going to say a little bit, quite a bit more safe. You have a lot of floor guys. I respect it. I mean, I think Diggs is not a bad, ceiling because the floor's kind of low, but the ceiling's kind of high. So, but, Connor's a good player. Prescott's a good player. Evans a good player. I really like Jonathan Taylor. McLaurin, there's some upside there. Maybe Chubb becomes something. You're taking dice rolls. I imagine you'll be making some trades and moving some things around. Maybe if there's injuries in Green Bay, one of those guys becomes something. Possibly. I mean, for $1, I don't mind it, especially to start the season, just kind of see what happens, especially considering Christian Watson's history of being injured. someone's bound to replace him. So, all in all, I think it's a good team. I think, I'm going to have to look at this. Let me see. I thought Sarah's team was safer. I might say that Sarah has like a little more depth at receiver. You kind of went the running back route over her going with the receivers, and I like that. So you're one of the only teams with like actual running back depth, which Lauren is probably very envious of right now. So if Sarah's like my 7th best fantasy team, you're probably number 6. I think you have some work to do, obviously. I mean, I think you have very good players. I think you're kind of hoping Diggs or McLaurin becomes the second star with Taylor, because I'm not really sure Evans is going to be that star. Like, Evans is a good player, don't get me wrong. But even last year when he had Keenan Allen, and Keenan Allen was having a great career year, I never felt like he was the star guy. It was like Amon-Ra and Christian McCaffrey. That's how I kind of feel about Mike Evans. And I don't think he's going to have a Keenan Allen-like year like Keenan Allen had last year. He'll have a good year, but I don't know if he's going to have like, let's go bananas, and the whole offense is based around me, and I have 108 catches. Like, that's a lie. I don't know if he's ever broken 90 catches in a season. I don't even know if he's broken 85. So, but he's a good player. It's a good team. I think what will probably end up happening is at some point you'll trade maybe a pair of these guys for like some star player. Like, I could see down the road if Warren's really desperate, you package like McLaurin and then throw in Ford and Chubb. Because, I mean, if you're waiting on Chubb's upside to come back, you're going to be waiting a while. You might even have to wait after the deadline and just kind of bite the bullet and trade him if you trade Ford. Because I can't imagine someone trades for Ford and doesn't ask for Chubb. Because why would I do that? And then Chubb comes back and takes the job anyway, even if Chubb's half of what he was. But I could see you doing like a McLaurin plus Chubb plus Ford for like, if Warren's, all 3 of her receivers are what they are, for like Garrett Wilson. I could see that. That would be easy. That's the kind of trade you could very easily do. So that maneuverability by itself is better than what Sarah has with all her receivers and like no RB2, her basically 0 RB build, and you actually have like, we'll say like 2. I don't know if you really went hero RB. You got some good players. You actually genuinely went like full on, like, let's get some RB depth. Thank you, Lord Jesus. You learned that fantasy, that championship season has wears on you well. So I think I don't think your team is great. I mean, it's funny that you drafted next to Stefan, and Stefan, I'm just like, damn, Stefan had a really good draft. But you had a good draft too. So don't get discouraged. I think your team is good. I think there's some work to do. But I think you're definitely a playoff team. And more so than the teams that I just named, who did not make the playoffs, you have shown that you can navigate the playoffs. You can go get the title. So you just like you made that A.J. Brown last year, you can be aggressive and make the necessary moves to kind of go get it, to go actually go for it. So, and that's more than I can say for a lot of teams in this league, over half the teams in this league. Yeah, good foundation, Mac. I think you did a good job. I forgot to give some like letter grades. So if we're giving Sarah like a letter grade, it would be like a C+. If we gave like Ryan a letter grade, it'd be a B+. If we're giving you a letter grade, I'll give you a B-. It's a good draft though. It's good. I think you'll make the playoffs. I think you're a solid team, not a great team, but it's a good foundation for what you need to do this season. And I think now that we've seen it, and now you've done it, and you've had the experience of it, you'll be able to navigate deep into the playoffs. So I'm not really all that concerned about you. I think you'll have another good year. Maybe not great year. Take some work to win a championship, but you'll have a good year, and you'll be there in the thick of things. So, and that's all you can really ask for coming out of the draft. So good job, Mac. Good draft.